Hello and welcome to the EBS-50 tutorials. My name is Jurgen Rodenhuis. I'm one of the developers of the ESL Server software. And today I'm going to talk to you about the API. In every episode so far, we've used the UI, the web interface of the ESL Server, to manage our labels, our base stations, our database connection, our templates. But what if you want to connect to the software without a human user, but with a computer that can send commands or request information? Well, that would mean an API, an application programming interface. And the EBS-50 and the new ESL Server Web Application running on the system have a completely fully featured REST API. So, let's start at the beginning. How do we get access? Well, thing is, it is already running. If you have your EBS-50 endpoint, you can say, well, this is home for the dashboard. I want to visit /API. And once we go there, we are greeted with flat text, which is just the way computers like it. They don't need all that fancy buttons and layouts and colors. All they want is data. Data they can process. Text. So, as we can see here, it says the Opticon ESL API is online. It's running this version of the web app, this version of the backbone DLL, and the copyright notice. But basically, this is the only part of the API that you are allowed to view through a browser. If I now go to API/ESL, no API key is provided because all of the endpoints on this REST API are protected with an API key. How do you get one? Well, luckily, that's pretty easy. For this, you do need to use the web interface to create that API key, but once you have it, there's no real problem in gaining access. Once you have an API key, you've got access. So how do we get it? Well, it is actually linked to the account system. Any action you perform on the ESL server, like linking a product, unlinking a product, changing the details of a product, all of that are changes to the system, and those changes are kept in the system logs. So if you wake up one day and you walk into your store and all of your ESLs have been unlinked, you want to know who did it, right? And you want to know if it was a human or an API. Well, all of that will be found in the logs. There is an other episode about the logs, so be sure to check that out. But what it means is, in order to hold someone accountable, you will need to have a user account to talk to that API. So, we've got our user account, and if we go to Manage Users, we can see here we've got the admin role and a floor linker, which is allowed to do a lot less than the admin. If you want more information on creating roles and users, be sure to check the roles and users tutorial in this tutorial playlist. You can find the link in the description. Without further ado, let's create an API key for the admin user. The admin is allowed to do everything. So it tells us with an API key, you allow the developers access to the API endpoints. The key is effective immediately, no restart required. So here we have a key. We can just copy it whole. Dashes included, they are part of the key. If you or your client loses the key, it cannot be recovered. So in that case, you'll need to revoke the current key and create a new one. So let's say I forgot to copy it. Oh darn. It's as easy as revoking the key. This is effective immediately. So if you have users that are misusing a key, if you click this revoke button, then immediately their access is revoked. There's no restart required. So, once again, we create an API key. It's a new random API key. We copy it, and just for safekeeping, we're going to store it in Notepad, just to be sure. And then we can talk to the API. And you will probably want to use a tool to talk to the API, and I'm going to use a very simple one. I've got a plugin for Firefox called Rester. I'm not making any commercials here. It's just a tool that I use. There are other tools. You can use, I don't know, Postman is a common one. Or you can use something that is built into your tool if you are an actual programmer and want to talk to our API. Well, it is a REST API, Representational State Transfer. What does that mean? It basically means that whenever you want information, or if you want to post information, you do that with the right verb. And verbs, it basically means, what do you want to do? Do you want to delete something, get something, post something new? Well, let's just start with an easy one. Let's say get. I want to get information. A get is really safe. A get never changes anything on the system itself. It only gives you information. A post or put, or of course delete, would change the information on the system, and those are the endpoints where logging is very useful if something goes wrong. So we want to do a get, and we want to do that on https EBS-50.local. We can send it. But there's an issue. There was a network error. Since we are using a self-signed certificate, you may want to make sure that your system is okay with that. So I'm going to say, yes, I accept the risk of that self-signed certificate. All right. So let's try again. EBS-50.local/API, the one we just saw on the browser. We say we want to get your information, and it says 200 OK. This response is also part of the representational state transfer. There are certain HTTP codes which tell us if something went wrong, and if so, exactly what went wrong. Well, nothing went wrong here. It's responding 200, which means OK. Now, let's get from the API all of the ESLs connected to the system. So we type in API/ESL, go and get them. A401 unauthorized. And the message that it's giving us is no API key provided. Because now we are trying to access data that we might want to keep private. So this is the point where we need to have a key to enter the system. So this is the API key. And to the headers, we're going to add a new name and value with the name x-api-key. And in the value, we will place our key. And if we try it again now, we get a 200 OK. Of course, you can try and guess any value. And then it will say, I see you send the API key, but the API key is not valid. So you're not allowed in. Luckily, we are. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but let's say we want to perform actions on ESLs. What actions are available? For that, we've got the documentation. In the manual, there is a very technical guide. It has all of the GET requests, POST requests, delete requests for each and every API endpoint, and you can use this as a reference guide to find out what is possible with your ESLs. So, for instance, we have an endpoint, API, ESL, then a MAC address and refresh image, which will refresh or resend the ESL's image. So, let's take this ESL, which has an actual MAC address, and let's type in that endpoint and see if we can get it to work. So we're going back to Rester and we say / and then the MAC address that we can see on the unit, B2A002E6. And then we want to refresh image. And some of you are already noticing what I'm doing wrong here. It's giving me a 200 OK. So it is trying to perform something, but if we look at the actual result, it's telling me it's an invalid property name because it is interpreting what we're sending as a GET request. We're saying from that ESL we want to get the value that is in the property called refresh image, which doesn't exist. It's not a property because we're not trying to get a property, we're trying to set a action. So instead of the get method, we have to use the post method. Once again, in the guide it says this is a post endpoint. So we use post and we'll try again. We'll say send and it's saying, yep, I'll refresh the image. And matter of fact, it did it immediately. So without using the UI, but only the API, we have just programmatically refreshed the image of this ESL. Now, some actions are allowed to be performed by users and others are not. For instance, I am also allowed to get information about the base stations, the EBSs. So I'll ask him, well, get me information about the base station. And it says, yeah, I've got one external base station connected. It is this EBS-50 with all of this information, the MAC address, the IP, and I can use certain post endpoints to change those values, of course. But the reason I'm showing this is because there's also a different user on the system. That user is called linker and he's in the role floor linker. And if we go to the role management page for a second here, we'll see that this user is not allowed to do anything with base stations. And he's not even allowed to view the base station page. So he's not allowed to view base stations. Once again, if we look to the manual, it will say what role or what action in our role are we supposed to own to be able to do this. For this action, the role you need to have is either refresh or resend ESL image, which if we go to ESLs would be here, refresh or resend ESL image. And the get on the base station has a different one, and each and every single endpoint tells us what kind of validation role do we need to own before we are allowed to do something in that vein as a user. So we just got information about the base stations. Let's go back to the users page and let's give the floor linker an API key. And let's try what we just did with the admin user, namely getting base stations. Let's just say linker is this one, just for safekeeping. With this key, we are allowed in, and with this key, we get a 403 forbidden. That endpoint exists, you got everything right, you've got the right API key to enter the system, but you are not allowed to perform this action. You lack permission. So that, in a nutshell, is how you get the API working. You need a user on the system, you need to give that user an API key, and then you can get access to the entire API of the system and all of the technical details for each and every endpoint that is available for each and every action you can find in the manual. Thank you for watching this episode. There are other episodes in this playlist as well. You can check the description for more details on that. If you have any further questions, you can also contact Opticon. Our contact information is in the description as well. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.